Victoria Sterling stood in the marble hallway of Serenity Hills, memory care, watching her mother stare at a wall like it held the last thing she could still understand. Margaret was 78, and 6 months ago she had been running board meetings and closing deals that made headlines. Now she could not remember Victoria's name. Dr. Patricia Hoffman approached with a clipboard thick with test results. Her voice carried the practiced gentleness of someone who delivered bad news for a living. Victoria straightened her suit jacket and braced for another conversation that ended in the same place. "What did the latest scans show?" Victoria asked. "The progression is faster than we anticipated," Dr. Hoffman said. "Her short-term memory loss is accelerating, and she is becoming increasingly agitated during basic care." Through the window, Margaret sat in her wheelchair, staring at nothing. Her hands, once steady enough to sign contracts with a single stroke, now trembled as she tried to hold a plastic cup. Victoria felt a tightness in her chest that money could not loosen. "You said the new drug from Switzerland would help," Victoria said. "Some patients show improvement," Dr. Hoffman replied. "Your mother has not responded to any treatment we have tried." Dr. Hoffman flipped through pages with the weight of expensive failure. "Her case is particularly aggressive." Down the hall, family photos lined Margaret's room. Childhood vacations, graduation days, business awards, and a lifetime of proof that Margaret had built something real. Margaret looked at the frames like they belonged to strangers. Victoria's phone buzzed with messages from her board of directors. Emergency meetings, urgent decisions, projects waiting for her signature. All she could see was her mother's empty stare. "There has to be something else," Victoria said. "Some specialist we have not consulted, or some treatment we have not considered." Dr. Hoffman closed the file with finality. "We brought in experts from Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, and the Memory Institute in California," she said. "Sometimes even the best medicine reaches its limits. Some of you watching from big cities or small towns know what it feels like when money cannot buy the one thing you need most." Victoria felt that truth settle into her bones. She did not know how to live with it. "Tell us in the comments where you are watching from." That afternoon, Victoria sat with Margaret in the sunroom and opened an old photo album. She pointed to familiar faces and waited for recognition to spark. Margaret touched the pictures with confusion, tracing cheeks and smiles she could not place. "This is you at my college graduation," Victoria said softly. "You were so proud." Margaret looked up with clouded eyes. "I am sorry, dear," she said. "Do I know you?" The question cut Victoria like glass. She had built a billion-dollar empire and owned properties in 12 states. Yet she could not help the person who mattered most. That evening, Victoria's assistant Rebecca called with updates from the office. 3 major deals needed immediate attention, and a zoning dispute in Phoenix required Victoria's presence. The quarterly earnings call could not be postponed again. "Reschedule everything," Victoria said as she stood at Margaret's bedside. Her mother was asleep, but even in sleep, her face looked lost and frightened. Victoria watched Margaret's hands and tried to remember when they last felt warm. "Victoria, the Phoenix deal alone is worth $40 million, Rebecca said carefully. "Investors are getting nervous about your absence." $40 million will not bring back to me," Victoria replied. She ended the call and stared at the silence. The next morning brought devastating news. Margaret had become combative during her shower and struck a nurse aide, screaming about strangers trying to hurt her. Security had been called, and restraints had been discussed in hushed voices. "This level of agitation is dangerous," Dr. Hoffman explained in an emergency meeting. "We need to increase her sedatives, and we may need to move her to the secured wing." Victoria felt her world crack. "The secured wing is for patients who are completely gone," she said. "Your mother sees threats everywhere," Dr. Hoffman said. "The medications will help her feel less afraid." Victoria realized she was losing her mother twice. First to the disease that stole her memories, then to drugs that would steal whatever spirit remained. Walking down the corridor afterward, Victoria passed the staff break room and heard a young woman speaking softly on the phone. The voice carried warmth that had been missing from every medical conversation for months. Victoria slowed without meaning to. "Yes, Grandmama, I remember what you taught me," the young woman said. "Treat the whole person, not just the sickness." Through the partially open door, Victoria saw a young black woman in scrubs, sitting alone on her break. Her name tag read Amara Washington, nurse aide. Amara spoke with love and respect, gentle and confident at the same time. I know these doctors are smart, Amara said into the phone, but they look at charts instead of souls. When Amara ended the call, she noticed Victoria in the doorway and stood quickly. Mrs. Sterling, I'm sorry, she said. I was just taking my break. You work with my mother? Victoria asked. Yes, ma'am, Amara said. I help with her daily care. Amara's eyes were warm and sincere. She is a beautiful lady, and I can tell she was strong before this illness took hold. Victoria stepped into the break room. What did you mean about treating the whole person? She asked. She heard how desperate her own voice sounded. Amara hesitated, careful with her words. My grandmother raised me, she said. She always said that when someone's mind gets confused, their heart still remembers love. Before Victoria could respond, the door swung open. Charge nurse Jennifer Morrison stood there with tight lips and authority. Her eyes flicked from Amara to Victoria, then settled on Amara like a wound. Washington, your break ended 5 minutes ago, Nurse Morrison said. Mrs. Patterson in room 12 needs assistance. Amara stood immediately. Yes, Mom, she said. I am sorry. As Amara hurried out, Nurse Morrison turned to Victoria. I apologize for the interruption, Mrs. Sterling, she said. Hey, staff sometimes forgets their boundaries. Victoria felt heat rise in her chest. She was answering my question, Victoria said. Nurse aide not qualified to discuss treatment approaches, Nurse Morrison replied. If you have concerns, Dr. Hoffman is the appropriate person to consult. That night, Victoria could not sleep. She returned after visiting hours and used her influence to gain access. She found Margaret in the common room, staring out at the darkness like it was a place she might disappear into. Ma, Victoria whispered, sitting beside her. I know you are still in there somewhere. Margaret turned toward the sound but did not recognize her. Her eyes held fear and confusion, like a lost child searching for home. Victoria took her mother's hand and felt how cold it was. In Margaret's room, Victoria noticed a small framed photograph partly hidden behind medical supply. It showed young Margaret in a modest living room, smiling with a black woman of the same age. On the back, in faint handwriting, one word was written like a secret someone meant to keep. Constance. Victoria stared at it, unsettled by the tenderness in her mother's smile. She had never seen this photo before in any album or office frame. She set it back where she found it, then sat on the edge of the bed. The next morning, Victoria arrived early and found Amara gently helping Margaret eat breakfast. The rushed efficiency Victoria usually observed was gone. Amara moved slowly and spoke in a soothing voice. There you go, Miss Margaret, Amara said. Warm and sweet. Margaret was calm, almost peaceful. She looked at Amara with something that resembled recognition, not of identity but of kindness. Victoria's throat tightened as she watched the fear soften. She has been agitated every morning for weeks, Victoria said quietly. Your mother needs to feel safe, Amara replied. When people are gentle and take their time, she relaxes. Dr. Hoffman appeared with her morning clipboard in professional urgency. Mrs. Sterling, we need to discuss medication adjustments, she said. Hair agitation requires stronger intervention. Victoria looked at Margaret, who was quietly finishing her breakfast. She does not look agitated right now, Victoria said. Temporary improvement, Dr. Hoffman answered. The underlying condition is progressing, and I have already adjusted her prescription. Victoria felt dismissed and furious. The medical establishment saw numbers and symptoms. Amara saw a person who needed gentleness. If you have ever watched experts talk over what your eyes can plainly see, share your thoughts in the comments. That afternoon, Victoria found Amara in Margaret's room, organizing supplies and humming softly. The melody felt like it belonged to another time, something older than the building itself. Victoria leaned against the doorway and listened for a moment. What song is that? Victoria asked. Something my grandmother used to sing, Amara said. Familiar rhythm can help a frightened mind feel steadier. Victoria hesitated, then spoke quietly. My mother reacts differently with you than with anyone else, she said. I do not understand why. Amara looked at Margaret with steady compassion. Because I do not rush her, she said. And I do not treat her fear like an inconvenience. Before Victoria could ask more, Dr. Hoffman entered with a brisk stride. Mrs. Sterling, she said, your mother's behavior reports are concerning. Victoria kept her voice controlled. The behavior changes when the approach changes, she said. Why are we treating her like a problem to manage? Dr. Hoffman's expression hardened into protocol. We are treating a progressive neurological disease with established standards, she said. Emotional approaches are not medically sound. Victoria felt the wall go up again. She left the office with the same hollow feeling she had carried for months. In the hallway, she caught sight of Nurse Morrison watching from a distance, arms crossed. Later that day, Victoria asked if Amara could sit with Margaret in the sunroom for a quiet hour. She framed it as a family request, not a rebellion. Amara agreed, but her eyes carried worry. Amara sat beside Margaret and spoke in a voice that sounded like home. She did not lecture or correct. She simply stayed present. Margaret's shoulders lowered little by little. Her breathing slowed, and the fear in her eyes loosened its grip. Victoria watched from across the room, barely daring to blink. For a brief moment, Margaret turned her face toward Victoria and rested her hand on Victoria's wrist. It was not full recognition, but it was contact. Victoria felt tears rise and forced herself to stay still so she would not break it. Then the door opened. Dr. Hoffman entered with 2 security guards and a face tight with professional displeasure. Nurse Morrison stood behind them like a witness. Mrs. Sterling, Dr. Hoffman said, I have received reports of unauthorized interventions, she continued. This aide is performing unlicensed therapy. Amara stood up immediately and stepped back. Her face flushed with embarrassment and fear. I was just talking with her, doctor, she said. Nothing medical. You are not qualified to provide any therapeutic intervention, Dr. Hoffman said. This exposes the facility to liability. Victoria's anger surged. My mother has been more present in the last hour than she has been in months, Victoria said. How is that dangerous? Dr. Hoffman's tone stayed cold. I am recommending this aide be reassigned away from your mother's care, she said. Patient safety comes first. Victoria looked at Margaret, who was already retreating into confusion as the room filled with tension. Victoria saw how fast fear returned when kindness was treated like a violation. She felt the third dismissal land like a door slamming on her mother's remaining dignity. Then we will discuss alternative arrangements, Victoria said quietly. Her voice did not rise, but it did not bend either. That night, Victoria made phone calls that changed everything. She contacted private care agencies and consulted lawyers about patient rights. She also called the board and told them she would be unavailable until further notice. Rika tried to push back. Victoria, the earnings call is tomorrow, she said. The market is already uneasy. Let it be uneasy, Victoria replied. I am done letting fear run my life. Then Victoria called Amara directly. I want to offer you a position as my mother's private companion, Victoria said. Full-time with benefits and a salary that clears your student loans within a year. Amara's voice trembled with shock. Mrs. Sterling, I do not understand, she said. I am not a registered nurse. I am not asking you to be a miracle, Victoria said. I am asking you to keep doing what you already did without being punished for it. Amara went quiet, then spoke softly. I could lose everything, she said. You already are losing everything, Victoria answered. They are taking you away from the only person who calms my mother. 3 days later, Victoria signed Margaret out of Serenity Hills and moved her into a private suite in Victoria's home. Amara became her primary caregiver, and Victoria hired a physician for monitoring and medication oversight. The arrangement was careful, supervised, and built around Margaret as a person, not a schedule. The change was not magic, but it was real. Margaret's fear decreased when her days slowed down. Her agitation softened when she felt safe. Victoria began to see what had been invisible inside a facility that ran like a machine. Margaret responded to patients the way a drowning person responds to air. Victoria hated how simple that truth felt. Dr. Hoffman visited once for a transfer consultation and walked through Victoria's home with a tight expression. She examined the plan and the oversight, then paused when Margaret reached for Amara's hand. Her Her professional certainty faltered for a moment. "You have put your mother at risk by leaving our protocols," Dr. Hoffman said. Victoria met her eyes. "Your protocols were making her disappear faster," Victoria replied. "You were treating fear with sedation." Dr. Hoffman said nothing for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "I did not expect her to respond like this," she admitted. Nurse Morrison called Victoria later and demanded documentation, warnings, and signatures. Victoria heard the same boundary language that had dismissed Amara in the break room. Victoria realized the facility was protecting itself, not Margaret. Weeks passed, then months. Margaret did not regain her past, but she regained dignity. She stopped being terrified at every touch and began to accept care without fighting it. She started responding to her name more often than not. She sometimes looked at Victoria and held her gaze, as if a bridge formed and then faded. Victoria learned to treasure even the smallest moment. Amara studied at night and took additional certifications while she worked. Victoria paid the tuition without making a spectacle of it. Amara paid it back with quiet devotion and relentless presence. When Margaret had a lucid morning, she sat by the window and watched birds in the yard. She turned to Amara and said, "You are kind," in a clear voice that made Victoria's heart stutter. Victoria cried in the kitchen where no one could see. 2 years later, Margaret's body grew tired. She died peacefully at home with Victoria on one side and Amara on the other. Victoria read aloud from a small stack of Margaret's old business speeches, then switched to softer words when Margaret's breathing slowed. At the memorial service, people Victoria had never met arrived with flowers and trembling hands. Black men and women in their 70s and 80s stood in line to speak. They carried the kind of memory that does not live in charts. One elderly woman stepped forward and introduced herself. "My name is Constance," she said. Victoria felt the words strike her like a bell. She remembered the faded handwriting on the back of the hidden photograph. She finally understood what her mother had kept private and what her heart had never let go. "Your mother saw us when the world told her not to," Constance said. "She stood beside us when it was not safe." Victoria looked at Amara, then at the crowd, and realized the care that reached Margaret had been tied to who Margaret truly was. Margaret had not remembered facts, but she had recognized belonging. Victoria felt shame for how long she had trusted only credentials. If this story moved you, please like and share it with someone who needs hope. 6 months after the funeral, Victoria established the Margaret Sterling Bridge Foundation. The program trained care teams to treat patients as whole people with histories, culture, and dignity, alongside medical oversight. It also funded scholarships for caregivers from communities that had been historically ignored, so wisdom did not have to stay in the shadows to be respected. Amara became the foundation's first director and helped build a curriculum that honored both science and humanity. Serenity Hills quietly changed its training policies after public pressure and internal review. She wrote that she had dismissed what she did not understand, and that the cost of that dismissal had been paid by families, not doctors. Today, the Bridge Foundation operates in 47 states and trains thousands of caregivers each year. Margaret's photograph hangs in the headquarters, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. The best care begins when someone is finally willing to see the person in front of them. How would you rate this story out of 10? We are curious about your feedback. If you have any suggestions, share them with us in the comments. Like every YouTube channel, our channel needs support. If you want to support our channel, please click the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thank you in advance for your support. Disclaimer, relied. This is a dramatization inspired by real events and people. Some details have been changed. This is not medical or legal advice.